Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Early Years Podcast. My name is Amanda, and I'm an early childhood educator facilitator with the Durham District School Board. And in this episode, I am also joined by Cecilia, who is also a early childhood educator facilitator. And before we begin and jump into this episode, I wanted to remind everybody that we put out new episodes of this podcast every first and third Thursday of the month. So make sure you are subscribed to our podcast so that you are notified of when we put out new episodes during the month. And if you're not following us already, we are on Instagram and Twitter. I will make sure to put links for that in the show notes. You can stay up to date with everything that we are doing through our social media. And for this week's episode, we are actually on episode 10, and I am so excited that we are being joined by Abeir, who is an ESL coach within the Durham District School Board. And this episode, she is going to be discussing with us ways that you can incorporate books and learning opportunities that are authentic and purposeful into our kindergarten classrooms. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and we will begin this week's episode.
My name is Abeir and I am the ESL ELD elementary facilitator for our school board. I've also am the executive member of the Muslim Educators Network of Durham, and I've been a part of that team for the last 4 years.
It's awesome.
I'm also a mother of 3 girls.
3 amazing girls, like just so smart and so amazing. I taught Abby's youngest daughter in kindergarten, and it was just such a joy to have your family part of our classroom because it's just such an amazing family to have part of our community. So that's how I know Abby. Yeah, so that's how I know Abby through that, and we connected because the month of October is Islamic Heritage Month, and I thought it would be a great time to be able to share more about Islamic Heritage Month and your work with it.
So Islamic Heritage Month for our Muslim Educators Network of Durham has really been a time for us to try and change the narrative that's been sort of written for us over the last, I'd say about 15 years. And so our slogan is "Our Story, Our Voice." And it's really an attempt for our community to take charge of and take control over the types of stories and the narratives that have been placed out there about the Muslim community. And we want to make sure that we are representing in the most positive way, but also making sure that we're reaching out to our parent community, our students, and letting them know that they can see themselves in the learning that's happening in the classroom, that they are welcome in our schools, that they should engage in their children's learning and also take part in their school communities. And so by hosting a series of events during the month of October, our hope is that we're creating bridges in which parents can enter our buildings and enter our spaces and feel welcome. And feel that, I understand what's happening in here. So a lot of our events are, curriculum focused and trying to educate parents on, the type of learning that happens in a school, whether it be STEM, or focus on, the arts or anything that we feel that parents may be interested in. That is what we try to provide them with. And so hopefully we're creating bridges. And in addition to that, we also ask, our allies, which are often our DDSB educators, to join us in creating these events and to participate. And we also like to invite them to attend our events as well. So we've had, superintendents, we've had the director of education attend our events. We've had DDSB educators volunteer at our events, and what this does is it creates a bridge so that there's understanding. And I think a lot of the issues surrounding Islamophobia often, comes back to a lack of understanding. And so our hope is our story, our voice. we will share our voice with our DDSB community, and that we as a community can overcome any of the Islamophobia that's been taking place, and changing that narrative that's been placed out there in a negative way.
Yes, that's so important, and making sure that us as educators, we, like you said, we are involved in that process as well to create those bridges with the families that are in our communities. Should have turned off the email. And so if educators are listening and they are in their kindergarten classrooms, is there ways that they can celebrate Islamic Heritage Month with their students and build those bridges within their classrooms themselves?
Absolutely.
I know yeah.
I think the best way to, it shouldn't just be during Islamic Heritage Month, obviously. Definitely. I feel like this needs to be embedded in everything we do. We talk about inclusive design, and we talk about culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy. That should be something that's just embedded in the way that we program, and it shouldn't be something that's secondary. So whether it be that the students are seeing their faces on the walls in the classroom, they're seeing themselves reflected in the walls around them, their faces, and also whatever type of programming that's offered, whether it's the names that are used, whether it's the type of foods that are included in the math questions, whether it is inviting parents to come in and read a dual language text, so that the text is being read in the student's first language and in English, so that we're really engaging our parent community. Those are all ways that we can ensure that we are engaging families. And oftentimes it's really amazing when we read stories that don't necessarily have to be about Ramadan or Eid, right? And
Yes.
and like oftentimes a lot of the stories that are out there are always focused on a celebration. It would be nice if we could also find texts that represent, people that just happen to be in the story that wear hijab, and not be about a person wearing a hijab, or being about someone in the story who happens to be Muslim, but it's not about them, necessarily going through a struggle, right? And I know when my children watch TV and there just happens to be a character in the cartoon that, looks like them and is wearing a hijab, they're like, Mama, she's Muslim. And that makes them so happy, right? That's what we'd like to see happen, right? And so it just becomes a natural part of the way that we teach. And, if we can introduce, when we're talking about, and when I think about kindergarten, I don't know if we do this as much, but like when we talk about, learning about explorers, or if we're talking about, contributions to society, it would be nice to include people of diverse backgrounds, when we're not necessarily the typical person that we usually talk about, but like try to find other people as well, so that our students are feeling represented and that they're being represented in a positive way, right?
Yep.
So those are all ways that we can definitely, for kindergarten, just make it a natural part of the way that we do things moving forward.
I love those examples that you've given, Abby, because I think as an ECE, that's one of the first questions that we're going to ask is like, well, how do I go about embedding this within the curriculum throughout the school year? Because usually, like you said, there's Islamic Heritage Month, a lot of things come up during that month to support you, but then after November 1st comes around and it's like, okay, now what do I do? And so the fact that you've given these great examples of inviting our families in to support us is a great tool to just use that resource, because a lot of us, we don't have the background and the knowledge and understanding. And as Amanda said, like, we want to celebrate and honor our students, but we want to be authentic about it. So I like that you've given some really great examples of how to be authentic, including inventors and different people that have contributed of different ethnicities is an amazing way to start, because that happens all year round, right? And so I think that's a nice way to have that embedded throughout the school year. So I appreciate those examples, because I'm going to write some of them down for myself as well.
Yeah. And, like sometimes people are a little hesitant because they, like you said, they're afraid to offend. or
Yep.
afraid to, I'm not of that background, therefore I don't want to, but we can't always rely on putting that responsibility on the one Muslim teacher in the school, or asking our students to be responsible for that. So one thing that you can do, I would say, is reach out to our equity department. I know that Camille Ali has done some seriously amazing work, and has really moved our equity department and introduced CRP in a way that is really engaging teachers. So she's a great resource, but also your ESL coaches that are in the school, and your ESL teachers are always a great resource as well to help. And then your families, your communities. I think in kindergarten, that's their first contact in school.
Mm-hmm.
And so how meaningful would it be to invite parents into the classroom, and make them feel like they're a part of the community? And I know that sometimes language is a barrier, but it's important to realize that our families that are newcomers come with experiences that are extremely valuable, and they come with their own set of knowledge that would be valuable in a classroom. And so we try not to allow language to be a barrier, and it could be simply asking the parent, would you like to come in and read this story in Arabic and English, right? Or I noticed at Seneca Trail, they have an Islamic Heritage Month display put up in the hallway, which a group of parents came in to do. So they're owning it, right?
Yeah.
But it was in partnership with the teachers at the school, so that it's not just a one-off thing, right? And I know at Seneca Trail, they do that all the time. As a parent, I appreciated that. And so those are all things that can be done, that would really engage our parent community. And for teachers that are looking for a way to communicate with our parent community and they're worried about the language barrier, there is a really cool app out there called Talking Points right now. And Amanda, you would just love this. So it's an app that allows you, sort of like Remind, but it's an app that allows you to add, your class list onto the app with your parents' phone numbers and their first language. And when you send out an email or a message, they receive it as a text message on their phone, and it comes in their first language. And so you could send out one message in English, and 12 different languages would then be sent out. And the thing that's great about this is oftentimes parents don't know how to, or they struggle with the steps of, downloading Remind and putting in the class code and all of that. There's no step for the parent. Parents know how to text message. So they get it as a text message, and then when they respond back to you in their first language, so say I respond to you, Amanda, in Arabic, you'll get it in English.
That's amazing. I've never even heard of that app.
Apps, it has over 100 languages on there. So that's something I'm really pushing. I feel like they should pay me at this point.
You should be sponsored by them. Maybe that'll be the first sponsor of our podcast, Talking Point. That's amazing. And I love all of your suggestions for the kindergarten classroom. I think it's so important to embed the heritage of all of our students into our classroom, and to bridge those, make bridges between us and the community members and the families in our classrooms. And I really like that you said beyond Islamic Heritage Month, because it is so important to, celebrate our families all year long. This isn't just a 1 month thing. Like, these are the students that are in your classroom. This is their lives. This is creating a sense of belonging for them in the classroom and making their classroom feel like their own space. I've always strived for that in our classrooms, and I think that's a really important part for educators to hear. And so you talked about making sure that the images on our classroom walls, those reflect the students that we have in our classroom. The books reflect the students that we have in our classroom, and not just having books about celebrations, but also just having those books that have just students, children portrayed in them that just look like them, right? And those books that provide, it's called Windows and Mirrors. I don't know if you've ever, the Windows and Mirrors books.
And sliding glass doors,
Yeah, and it's just I love the way those, the mirrors, so that they can see themselves reflected in the books that they see, but also having windows so that they can see into the lives of others as well. I think it's really important to have that mix of books in your classroom. And then when you are talking about historical figures, including a variety of historical figures or current figures in your classroom. And I was just looking up some art lessons that you could do as well, and making sure that even in your art lessons you're portraying a variety of different artists and giving focus to different places as well. I think that's also really important.
And careful, because with the art, because so two things. You talked about windows and mirrors, and it's important that whatever books that we choose, we have to be cognizant of whose voices we're hearing. And so who's the author? Is that an authentic voice? Are they being, are we elevating the voice of someone who is from that community, or is it someone who is writing about another community? So that's one thing, right? And then there's also I can't remember off the top of my head the name of the person who came up with this concept, but curtains, right? And it was because sometimes when people look through the mirrors by reading a book, right, or they look through and they look at a community, we've had people not from that community writing about that community in a way that makes the community, maybe it doesn't perceive them the way they would like to be perceived, right? So then they put up curtains, like, you don't get to come into my space kind of situation, right? Especially with our Indigenous community, because when they've allowed people in and then they looked at their ceremonial their ceremonies, they ended up actually using that and weaponizing their ceremonies against them and making them illegal, right? So when we talk about art, it's really important to make sure that we're not appropriating anyone's culture, and we really want to focus on just like, especially when it comes to Indigenous learning, we want to focus on truth and reconciliation, residential schools, and that's it. We're in the history. We're not focusing on culture. And if we are going to introduce culture, we invite someone from that community into our classroom. And I would say the same for because Islam is a religion, it's not a culture, right? And sometimes it can be tied closely, but it's really so, like, for instance, I sometimes see teachers like doing mendi, the henna on the hands for Islamic Heritage Month. Well, my family's from Syria, and we don't put henna on the hands, so that's not representative of my culture. That's culture, it's not religion. So you also have to be careful of that, and being cognizant of, like, not appropriating culture, but maybe just focus on the text and on reading responses and things like that, and maybe just keep the culture for the people from that community, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that 100% makes sense. And if you want to embed that, inviting community members in.
Right.
Yeah.
And you also doubt if, if you're unsure, like you said, of, am I being appropriate or inappropriate, to reach out to certain members, like I think you mentioned the resource teachers in the school library, like other educators that have those resources, to reach out to the equity committee and get those answers, to just also make sure that, if you can't reach out to your families, or if it's for whatever reason, that you are being honoring and authentic to the
absolutely
religion, right? Not
the religion or the culture or whatever it is that because your intentions are good, but then we also have to think about the impact of the action, right? And if it can be in any way harmful. And we obviously, as educators, we never want to cause harm. So I know that it's not my place to share about the culture of like Indigenous culture, for instance. So I'm not going to go there because it's not my place, right? If I want to, I might ask someone from their community to come in and maybe share if there's something that's connected to the curriculum in some way. But it's not my place. So my place as an educator is to focus on the history, truth and reconciliation, and residential schools. That's what I'm looking at as an educator. And even then, I also constantly ask for resources. Can you collaborate with me to come up with some texts that are specific to the needs in my classroom, and things like that. Does that make, like, and I know I'm kind of going off topic of Islamic Heritage Month, but I'm just trying to use it for myself as an educator, things that I am cognizant of when I'm programming for my students.
Yeah, that's perfect. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about today, Abby, before we?
Well, I just we ask that our educators and our kindergarten teachers please help us in promoting our Islamic Heritage Month lineup of events and join us. We would love to have you there. This month we have a family fitness night where we have one of our DDSB educators. We call him Mr. Fun, but his name is Richard Leone. And he does like online interactive family fitness to keep kids healthy and active during this time. We also will be having an art night where we've asked a local artist to teach us how to do some Arabic calligraphy.
Ooh.
Yeah, and we will also be having a STEM night where we have some DDSB educators who have volunteered their time to show us how to create circuits as well as do coding as well.
Nice.
And it's all going to be done interactively online. And then, we have parent sessions as well about how to keep healthy and safe during COVID, how to keep your mind, body, and spirit healthy. And we've invited a local children's author, to do a live reading for us as well. So there's a number of events that we've organized, and I hope that everything goes smoothly with the online platform. Yeah, we highly encourage you to share that with your families. That's the first step in getting parents involved, letting them know about the networks that are out there, right, to support them.
Abby, would you be able to share those links with us when they get set up? We can share that with our educators, because I think those are all great. And, they don't, like you said, it's not focusing on so much the history of it, but just engaging our families and our communities and that sort of thing. So I love that it's very just inclusive of who you are as people.
Yeah, we're not focused, like sometimes people think when we created the Muslim Educators Network that this was really about a focus on teaching religion. It is absolutely not about that, because our community is comprised of a variety of different types of Muslims that are practicing along a wide spectrum. And so we don't focus on religion. It's just about us coming together, the sense of community, and engaging our community in a positive way, and just changing that the narrative to make it more positive moving forward.
I love that message. Yeah,
I don't want my children to ever feel embarrassed to share that they're Muslim, or embarrassed to share parts of their identity in the classroom. And part of the reason why this started was because our children were experiencing that. And so this is our way of sort of taking control and trying to find a good way to make sure that our kids grow up in the DDSB feeling proud about who they are and their identities, and so that also that their families could feel like they're a part of the DDSB community as well.
And they should, because that's right there in our kindergarten curriculum or program, that we want our students to have a sense of identity, a positive sense of identity within the classroom. And it also talks about engaging our community and involving our families. So all of the things that Men's Group is doing is supporting more of what kindergarten is also doing as well. So I love that you're able to share all of these great experiences and ideas with us that we can put out there to our educators. So thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on your podcast. This was a delight.
Thank you so much for taking some time and coming on the podcast and sharing all this amazingness with us. We really appreciate it. And I will be, I'm sure, seeing you around
Absolutely.
DDSB.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me.